I arrived at Marcella's at exactly 6:47 p.m., wearing a navy dress I'd bought 3 years ago and shoes I'd resold twice. The valet looked at my 2014 Toyota Camry like it had personally offended him. "We have street parking 2 blocks down," he said, not quite making eye contact. "I'll be leaving the keys," I replied, handing them over with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. He took them reluctantly like he was doing me a favor. I walked through the glass doors into the restaurant I'd owned for 16 months. Marcella's was the kind of place that appeared in lifestyle magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Exposed brick walls from the original 1890s warehouse. A Michelin star that the chef, André, had earned 6 months after I'd hired him away from a restaurant in Paris. The hostess greeted me with practiced politeness. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "I'm with the Palmer party," I said. She checked her tablet and her expression shifted slightly. Not quite recognition, but awareness that the Palmer party was important. Anniversary celebration. 12 guests. The private dining room upstairs. Of course. Right this way. I followed her up the floating staircase to the second floor, where my family had already gathered. Through the glass walls of the private dining room I could see them. Mom in her cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Dad in his custom suit. My sister Victoria with her husband James, both of them looking like they'd stepped out of a country club catalog. Victoria saw me first. Her smile was the kind you give to someone you pity. "Oh good, you made it," she said as I entered. "We were worried you'd gotten lost." "The restaurant isn't hard to find," I said, taking the empty seat at the far end of the table. The one that had clearly been added as an afterthought. "Well, it's not exactly your usual type of place," James said with a laugh. "Probably used to more casual dining." I smiled and said nothing. The table was already full. Besides Victoria and James, there was Uncle Richard and Aunt Patricia, my cousin Daniel with his fiancée Emma, Mom's best friend Carol and her husband, and 2 of Dad's business partners whose names I couldn't remember. "Now that everyone's here," Mom said, standing up with her champagne glass, "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate our 35th anniversary. Thomas and I have been blessed with a wonderful life, a successful family, and the means to enjoy occasions like this." Everyone raised their glasses. I lifted mine too, even though I noticed I'd been given water while everyone else had champagne. "Victoria has just been promoted to Senior Vice President at Hartley Financial," Mom continued. "We couldn't be prouder. She's following in her father's footsteps, building a real career in finance." Applause around the table. Victoria beamed. "And we're grateful to have all of you here," Mom concluded, sitting back down. Her eyes slid over me without acknowledgement like I was part of the furniture. The first course arrived. Seared scallops with a citrus reduction. I recognized André's plating style immediately. He'd been hesitant about the scallops when I'd approved the spring menu, worried they were too simple. I told him that simple done perfectly was better than complex done adequately. "So, Kathleen," Aunt Patricia said, addressing my mother, "I heard you just got back from the Amalfi Coast. How was it?" "Absolutely divine," Mom said. "We stayed at the most wonderful hotel." "Thomas, what was it called?" "Hotel Santa Caterina," Dad said. 5 stars. Impeccable service. "We should go back for our 40th, Mom said. "Make it a tradition." Speaking of traditions, Carol interjected, "Victoria, I heard you and James are looking at houses in Westbrook Heights. That's quite the neighborhood." "We are," Victoria said. "We found a gorgeous colonial. 5 bedrooms, 3-car garage, an acre of land. We're making an offer next week." "How wonderful," Aunt Patricia cooed. "And what about you, dear?" He turned to me for the first time. "Are you still in that little apartment downtown?" "I am," I said. "Well, that's practical," she said in a tone that meant the opposite. "Sometimes it takes people longer to get established." "Some people never really get established," Victoria murmured to James, just loud enough for me to hear. The main course arrived. Filet mignon with truffle butter and roasted vegetables. I'd had a long discussion with André about the truffle supplier. He'd wanted to use a vendor from Italy, but I'd found a local forager who provided better quality at half the price. "This is exceptional," one of Dad's business partners said. "Thomas, you picked a great restaurant." "Only the best for our anniversary," Dad said. I've been coming to Marcella's for years. The owner has excellent taste. I took a sip of my water and said nothing. Kathleen, you were saying earlier about the charity gala? Carol prompted. Oh yes. Mom's eyes lit up. I'm chairing the hospital benefit in September. We're expecting to raise over $200,000. It's going to be at the Brennan Center. You know, that beautiful event space downtown. That's impressive, Aunt Patricia said. You always did have a gift for organizing these things. It helps to have connections, Mom said. The right people, the right venues. Speaking of which, Victoria, have you decided on a venue for your company's annual dinner? We're looking at a few options, Victoria said. James's firm uses the Riverside building for their events. The ballroom there is stunning. I knew the Riverside building well. I'd purchased it 14 months ago. Victoria's company, Hartley Financial, held the lease for their offices on floors 12 through 15. That lease was actually up for renewal in 7 weeks, but I hadn't sent the renewal terms yet. The Riverside building is quite nice, I said quietly. Victoria looked at me like she'd forgotten I could speak. Oh, have you been there? Once or twice. For what, a job interview? James laughed at his own joke. I smiled and cut another piece of my steak. The conversation continued around me. They talked about stock portfolios and vacation homes and private school options for Victoria's future children. They talked about the new country club and the charity circuit and who was buying what in which neighborhood. Not once did anyone ask me a question. Not about my job. Not about my life. Not about anything. Around 8:30, as dessert was being served, a chocolate torte that had taken Andre 3 months to perfect, Mom stood up again. I want to take a moment, she said, to talk about family. Thomas and I built our life on hard work and dedication. We taught our daughters to value success, to strive for excellence. She paused, looking at Victoria with obvious pride. Victoria has embodied those values. She's built a career, she's marrying a successful man, she's becoming the kind of woman any parent would be proud of. More applause. Victoria looked appropriately humble. But not everyone finds their path as easily, Mom continued, and my stomach tightened. Some people struggle. Some people make choices that lead them away from success rather than toward it. She wasn't looking at me, but everyone else was. I think it's important to acknowledge that not every child will make you proud, Mom said. Not every child will achieve what you hoped they would. And that's something parents have to accept. The table had gone quiet. Even Victoria looked uncomfortable now. Kathleen, Dad started, but Mom held up her hand. No, Thomas, I need to say this. We've been tiptoeing around it for years. She finally turned to look directly at me. Sweetheart, I love you. I do. But you have to understand that watching you struggle has been hard for us. Watching you work dead-end jobs, live in that tiny apartment, barely scrape by, it's painful for a mother to see. Mom, Victoria said quietly, maybe this isn't the time. When is the time? Mom's voice rose slightly. When is it appropriate to be honest? She's 31 years old, Victoria. 31. At her age, you were already climbing the corporate ladder. At her age, I had 2 daughters and your father had already made his first million. She turned back to me, and there was something in her eyes that might have been genuine concern, buried under layers of disappointment. I'm saying this because I care, she said. You need to hear it. You'll never amount to anything if you keep living like this. Working these little jobs, pretending that's enough. It's not enough. It's never going to be enough. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked down at my dessert plate. The chocolate torte was beautiful. Andre had used gold leaf on top, a touch I'd initially thought was too much, but he'd insisted it made the presentation special. I appreciate your concern, I said finally, my voice steady. But I'm doing fine. You're not doing fine, Mom said. You're barely surviving. And I can't keep pretending that's acceptable. Kathleen, please, Dad said, but there was no real conviction in his voice. I was about to respond when our waiter, Marcus, appeared at the head of the table. He was carrying the leather folio with the check inside. This was the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. Marcus approached the table and I saw him glance at me. We'd rehearsed this earlier. Well, not rehearsed exactly. I'd simply told him what would happen and how to handle it. Good evening, Marcus said with professional courtesy. I hope everything was to your satisfaction. Excellent meal, Dad said, reaching for the check. Really exceptional. But Marcus didn't hand the folio to Dad. He walked the length of the table and placed it directly in front of me. Everyone stared. There must be a mistake, Dad said, exactly as I'd known he would. I made the reservation. I'll be taking care of the check. Marcus looked at me, waiting for my signal. I gave a small nod. No mistake, sir, Marcus said politely. Ms. Palmer requested that the check be delivered to her. That's ridiculous, Victoria said. She can't afford this. The bill for a party this size has to be $8,400, I said calmly. Plus tip. Victoria's mouth fell open. Exactly. There's no way. No way I can afford it? I finished. You're right. It would be difficult on the salary you all assume I make. I opened the leather folio and looked at the itemized bill. Everything was correct. The wine pairings Dad had ordered without asking about price. The premium cuts of beef. The imported cheese course. The $300 bottle of champagne for the toast. I pulled my credit card from my purse. Not the debit card tied to my personal checking account, but the black Amex connected to my primary business account. Wait, Mom said. Sweetheart, you don't have to do this. Your father and I can. I know you can, I said, handing the card to Marcus. But I've got it. Marcus took the card and disappeared. The table remained frozen. Where did you get that credit card? Victoria asked. That's a Centurion card. Those require a certain income level. You'd need to make at least $200,000 a year, I said. Yes, I know the requirements. That's impossible, James said flatly. What job do you have that pays that kind of money? I took a sip of my water, considering how much to reveal. I'd planned this moment for weeks. Months really. Maybe years if I was being honest with myself. I work in property management, I said. Property management? Uncle Richard spoke up for the first time. Like managing apartment buildings? Something like that. Marcus returned with my card and the receipt. I signed it, adding a 25% tip. Andre and his team had earned it. Thank you, Miss Palmer, Marcus said. And Mr. Dubois wanted me to let you know that he's prepared the special dessert you requested. He'll bring it out momentarily. Perfect, I said. Thank you, Marcus. As he walked away, Mom leaned forward. Who is Mr. Dubois? And what special dessert? Andre Dubois is the chef here, I said. And I asked him to prepare something special for your anniversary. Right on cue, Andre himself emerged from the kitchen, followed by two servers carrying a three-tiered anniversary cake. It was stunning, white fondant with hand-painted gold designs, topped with sugar flowers that looked real. Andre approached the table with a smile. Mrs. Palmer, Mr. Palmer, happy anniversary. It's been my pleasure to prepare your dinner this evening. This is beautiful, Mom said, genuine delight breaking through her confusion. Thank you so much. We've heard wonderful things about Marcella's. I'm glad you chose to celebrate here, Andre said. Then he turned to me. Ms. Palmer, will you be joining us in the kitchen later to review the new menu proposals? The table went silent again. Andre, I said carefully, this might not be the best time. Who is Miss Palmer? Victoria interrupted. Is there another Palmer at this restaurant? Andre looked confused. I'm referring to your sister. Ms. Jenna Palmer. The owner of Marcella's. If the previous silence had been absolute, this one was cosmic. Owner. Dad said slowly. There must be some confusion. Our daughter doesn't own. I've owned Marcella's for 16 months, I said quietly. I purchased it from the previous owner in February of last year. Victoria laughed. It was a sharp, disbelieving sound. That's insane. This restaurant would cost, I don't even know, millions. The purchase price was $3.8 million, I said. The building itself was another $5.2 million. I bought both as a package deal from a seller who needed to liquidate quickly. $9 million? Mom's voice was faint. You're saying you spent $9 million? Well, I didn't pay cash, I said. I put down $2.1 million and financed the rest through my commercial lending relationships. The restaurant generates enough revenue to cover the mortgage and operating expenses, plus profit. James was shaking his head. This doesn't make any sense. Where did you get $2 million for a down payment? From my other properties, I said. I've been investing in commercial real estate for 7 years. I started with a small office building I bought with money I'd saved, plus a loan from a private investor. I renovated it, leased it to businesses, used the income and equity to finance the next purchase. Each property generated revenue that I rolled into more acquisitions. How many properties? Dad asked. His face had gone pale. I calculated quickly in my head. Currently, I own 14 commercial properties outright and I have partnership stakes in 6 others. Total portfolio value is approximately $127 million, though that fluctuates with the market. No one spoke. No one moved. Even Andre looked surprised, and he'd known I was wealthy. That's impossible, Victoria finally said. You live in a tiny apartment. You drive an old car. You dress like someone who doesn't need to impress anyone, I finished. The apartment downtown is convenient and meets my needs. The car is reliable. The clothes are functional. I prefer to invest my money rather than display it. But how? Mom asked. How did you do this without us knowing? You never asked, I said simply. You assumed I was struggling because I didn't brag about my success. You assumed I was failing because I didn't match your definition of achievement. I stood up, smoothing my navy dress. The building that houses Victoria's company, the Riverside building, I bought that 14 months ago, I said. Your lease expires in 7 weeks, Vic. I was planning to send renewal terms next week, though the rent will be increasing by 18% to match current market rates. Victoria's face had gone white. I turned to Dad. The building where your law firm has its offices, the Palmer Professional Center on 4th Street? I acquired that in a portfolio purchase 6 months ago. Your lease is actually up for renewal next month. I was going to give you favorable terms since your family, but I haven't finalized those yet. Dad opened his mouth but no sound came out. The Brennan Center, where you're planning the charity gala in September? I looked at Mom. I bought a 60% ownership stake in that property 3 months ago. We're actually raising the rental rates for events starting in August. Your gala might cost more than you budgeted. This can't be real, Aunt Patricia said. Thomas, did you know about any of this? Dad shook his head mutely. I didn't want you to know, I said. I wanted to see if you'd value me without knowing about my success. If you'd treat me with respect even when you thought I had nothing. If family meant more than achievement. We do value you, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. Do you? I asked. Because 10 minutes ago, you announced to this entire table that I'd never amount to anything. You said watching me struggle was painful. You said not every child will make their parents proud. Tears were forming in Mom's eyes now. The truth is I haven't struggled, I said. I've thrived. I built a commercial real estate portfolio worth over $100 million in 7 years. I did it quietly without fanfare, without your support or approval. And I'm genuinely proud of that. Jenna, Dad finally found his voice. Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped. We could have. Could have what? I interrupted. Invested? Given advice? Taken credit? I didn't want your help, Dad. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it alone. And I did. Andre cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps I should give the family some privacy. No, stay, I said. We're actually done here. Thank you for an excellent dinner, Andre. The scallops were perfect. You were right to trust your instincts. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. Wait, Victoria called out. You can't just drop this bomb and leave. We need to talk about this. We need to. We don't need to do anything, I said, turning back. You need to process this information. You need to reconcile the person you thought I was with the person I actually am. That might take a while. Our lease, Victoria said desperately. The renewal terms. You said. I'll have my property manager send over the standard renewal package, I said. The same terms I'd give any tenant. No special treatment. No family discount. You'll pay market rate like everyone else. Jenna, please. Mom stood up, her voice breaking. Don't leave like this. It's our anniversary. Can we talk about this? I paused at the door. Part of me wanted to stay, wanted to have the conversation, wanted to give them a chance to apologize properly. But another part of me, the part that had spent years being dismissed and overlooked and pitted, that part needed to walk away. Happy anniversary, I said finally. I hope the next 35 years are everything you want them to be. I left the private dining room and walked down the floating staircase. The main restaurant was still full of diners enjoying their evening, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded upstairs. Marcus intercepted me at the bottom of the stairs. Miss Palmer, is everything all right? It's fine, Marcus. Thank you for your help tonight. The kitchen staff wanted me to tell you that the new menu testing is scheduled for Thursday, he said. Will you still be available? Absolutely. I'll be here at 3. I walked out of the restaurant and handed my ticket to the valet. While I waited for my car, I looked up at the second-floor windows. I could see silhouettes of my family still seated around the table, probably arguing about what had just happened. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. We need to talk. This is insane. Another from Dad. Please call me when you get home. We need to discuss this. And one from Mom. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? I didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. The valet brought my Toyota Camry around. It looked absurdly out of place in front of Marcella's, surrounded by Mercedes and BMWs and the occasional Bentley. But it was paid off, it ran perfectly, and it got me where I needed to go. I tipped the valet $20 and drove away. The thing about building a commercial real estate empire is that it's mostly boring. It's spreadsheets and lease agreements and property inspections. It's conference calls with contractors and negotiations with tenants and meetings with lenders. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting. It's just work. But it's work that compounds. Each property generates income. That income funds the next purchase. That purchase generates more income. Over time, it builds into something significant. I'd started 7 years ago with $180,000. Every penny I'd saved from my first job out of college, where I'd worked as a property management assistant making $42,000 a year. I'd lived on half my salary and saved the rest. My family had thought I was broke. I'd been building capital. My first purchase was a small office building in a transitional neighborhood. 3 stories, mostly vacant, needed significant repairs. The seller was motivated. A divorce situation where neither party wanted to deal with the property. I'd paid $340,000, putting down $180,000 and getting a commercial loan for the rest. I'd spent 6 months renovating it myself. I'd learned basic plumbing, electrical work, drywall repair. I'd negotiated with contractors, hunted for deals on materials, worked evenings and weekends. When it was finished, I'd leased all 3 floors to small businesses. The rental income covered my mortgage and gave me a small profit each month. 18 months later, I'd saved enough for another down payment. I'd bought a small retail space in an up-and-coming area. Then an industrial warehouse. Then a mixed-use building with retail on the ground floor and apartments above. Each purchase was strategic. Each property was undervalued or distressed in some way. Each one had potential that other buyers didn't see or didn't want to develop. And I did it all while my family assumed I was barely getting by. I pulled into the parking garage of the building where I actually lived. Not the tiny studio apartment my family knew about, but a 3-bedroom penthouse I'd purchased 2 years ago. The studio was still useful as a mailing address, a place to direct my family when they asked where I lived. But I hadn't actually stayed there in over a year. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Victoria. I looked up the Riverside building sale. The purchase price was $19 million. How did you afford that? I considered not responding, but some part of me wanted her to understand. I typed, portfolio loan secured by my other properties. Put down $4.2 million, financed the rest. Building generates $2.1 million in annual rental income. After expenses and debt service, nets about $420,000 per year. Good investment. Her response came immediately. You have $4 million in cash? Me, I have access to $4 million in equity lines of credit against my other properties. Different thing. Victoria, how is this real? How is any of this real? Me, 7 years of work. Smart decisions. Calculated risks. You could have done it too if you'd wanted. Victoria, but you never said anything. Me, would it have mattered? She didn't respond to that. I rode the elevator to my penthouse and walked into the open-plan living space that overlooked the river. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Hardwood floors. The kitchen I'd renovated myself because I enjoyed the work. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch looking out at the city lights. My phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hi, Dad." "Jenna." His voice was heavy. "We need to talk about what happened tonight." "Okay. First, I need to apologize. Your mother shouldn't have said those things. Neither should I have stayed silent while she did. That was wrong." "Okay. But I also need to understand," he continued. "Why keep this secret? Why let us think you were struggling when you had built all of this?" I took a sip of wine, considering my answer. "Remember when I graduated college?" I said finally. "You told me that the real world would teach me what I was worth. That I'd need to prove myself." "I remember. I proved myself, Dad. I built something significant. I created value. I succeeded beyond what most people accomplish in a lifetime. And I did it without your help or approval or acknowledgement." "But we're your family," Dad said. "We should have known. We should have been part of it." "Why?" I asked. "So you could take credit? So you could tell your friends about your successful daughter? So Mom could brag at her charity events? That's not fair. Isn't it?" I challenged. "You spent years comparing me to Victoria. Years making comments about my apartment and my car and my clothes. Years assuming I was failing because I didn't perform success the way you expected." Dad was quiet for a long moment. "You're right," he said finally. "We did assume. We did judge. And we were wrong. Thank you for saying that." "The leases," Dad said. "The ones for my firm and Victoria's company. Are you really going to raise the rates?" "To market rate, yes," I said. "That's standard business practice. Every property owner adjusts rents to match market conditions. You taught me that, actually. You used to talk about it at dinner." "But we're family." "Exactly," I said. "We're family. Which means the relationship should matter more than business terms. But you treated me like I didn't matter when you thought I had nothing. Now that you know I have something, suddenly family matters." Another long silence. "What do you want from us?" Dad asked quietly. "I want you to respect me," I said. "Not because of what I own or what I've built, but because I'm your daughter. I want you to value me even when you think I'm unsuccessful. I want to matter to you without needing to prove anything. You do matter to us." "Then prove it," I said. "Not tonight. Not tomorrow. But over time. Show me that you value me for who I am, not for what I've accomplished." "I will," Dad said. "We will. Your mother is devastated, by the way. She's been crying since you left." "I'm sorry she's upset," I said, and I meant it. But she needed to hear what I said. "I know," Dad admitted. "We both did." We talked for a few more minutes. Dad asked questions about my properties, my business model, my plans for the future. I answered some and deflected others. This wasn't the time for a full accounting of my empire. When we hung up, I felt exhausted but also strangely lighter. Over the next week, my family slowly processed the revelation. Victoria called to discuss the lease renewal terms. We had a surprisingly professional conversation where she negotiated for a 12% increase instead of 18%. And I agreed because the building was performing well anyway. Dad invited me to lunch at his club, where we had a long conversation about commercial real estate investment strategies. He admitted he'd always invested in stocks and bonds, never considering property. I suggested a few opportunities he might explore. Mom took longer to reach out. When she finally did, she asked if we could have coffee. Just the two of us. We met at a cafe downtown, not Marcella's, somewhere neutral. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Mom started, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "About wanting us to value you without the success. And I realize I failed at that," she said. "I've been measuring you against some imaginary standard, comparing you to Victoria, judging you based on appearances. I convinced myself I was being helpful when I was really just being cruel." "You weren't cruel," I said. "You were dismissive. You were condescending. But not cruel." "Feels like the same thing," Mom said softly. "I'm sorry, Jenna. I'm sorry for the things I said at our anniversary dinner. I'm sorry for all the years of making you feel less than. You deserved better from me." I felt tears prickling at my eyes. "Thank you for saying that. Can I ask you something?" Mom said. "Why real estate? Why that path?" Because it's solid, I said. It's tangible. A building exists. It provides value. People need places to work and live and gather. Real estate isn't flashy, but it's real. It compounds. It builds wealth quietly. Like you, Mom said with a small smile. Building wealth quietly. I suppose so. We talked for over an hour. Not about properties or money or business, but about life. About what we wanted. About regrets and hopes and the ways families hurt each other without meaning to. When we left the cafe, Mom hugged me. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Not because of the buildings or the money. Because you had the courage to build something on your own terms. Thanks, Mom. 3 months later, my parents' charity gala took place at the Brennan Center. I attended, wearing a dress that cost more than my usual Target purchases but still nothing extravagant. Mom introduced me to her charity friends as my daughter Jenna, who owns several properties downtown. Victoria brought James to tour the Riverside building, wanting to show him the office space they were renewing. My sister owns it, she told him, and there was genuine pride in her voice. Dad started texting me articles about commercial real estate trends, asking my opinion. We developed a rhythm of weekly calls where we discussed market conditions and investment strategies. Things weren't perfect. There were still awkward moments, still adjustments to be made as my family learned to see me differently. But slowly the relationships shifted. They started asking about my life, my work, my thoughts. Not because I owned buildings or had money, but because they'd finally understood that I was worth their attention regardless. 6 months after the anniversary dinner, I received a text from Victoria. Coffee this week? Want to talk about something non-lease related? We met at the same cafe where Mom and I had reconciled. Victoria looked nervous. I've been thinking about making a change, she said. The corporate finance thing, it's what I'm good at, but I'm not sure it's what I want anymore. What do you want? I don't know yet, she admitted. But watching you build something on your own terms, it made me realize I've been following a path other people set for me. I want to figure out what my path looks like. That's scary, I said. Terrifying, she agreed. But maybe necessary. We talked about possibilities, about dreams, about the difference between success that looks impressive and success that feels meaningful. As I drove home that evening in my Toyota Camry, which I still hadn't replaced because why fix what works, I thought about that anniversary dinner. I'd gone in prepared to prove something. To show my family they'd been wrong about me. To demonstrate my worth through numbers and properties and undeniable financial success. But what I'd actually proven was something different. That my value existed independently of their recognition. That I didn't need their approval to be successful. That I could build an empire quietly, privately on my own terms. And somehow in proving I didn't need them to see me, I'd finally made them understand how to look. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Dinner Sunday? Your mother wants to try that new restaurant downtown. The one with the Michelin star. I smiled and typed back, Marcella's? I know the owner. I can get us a table. Some secrets once revealed change everything. But sometimes, in the breaking open, what was hidden becomes the foundation for something stronger. I owned 14 commercial properties worth $127 million. But what I'd really built was the understanding that I mattered. With or without them knowing. And that was worth more than any building I'd ever bought.